Alright. Welcome to the semi-final of the Lund IV 2016. In opening government, we have Cambridge CK. Woo! RY, VV.
No, REYYA.
Opening government, we have Lund.
Woo! Woo!
We have 7 minutes. The person not going to be protected. And without further ado, I would then like to welcome the Prime Minister to the stage.
We cannot give back the lives of the millions of indigenous communities who were slaughtered in the genocides in Australia and America. What we can give back is the dignity and right to self-determination of those who still survive in the status quo. 3 things in this speech panel. Firstly, a principal claim as to why this debt is owed. 2, why the status quo is never going to be sufficient to protect indigenous communities. And thirdly, why our particular policy will work. Before that, the mechanism by which we will do this. 5-point model. Firstly, we will give them definitely the land back to the indigenous communities, roughly corresponding to the status quo reservations that are protected, but we are happy to generously expand this based on the indigenous communities' own claims to their land. Second, everything will be self-determined except for foreign policy and defense policy. Third, funding by the national governments will be given to these indigenous communities as a proportion of the national government that is greater than the population of these indigenous communities. However, unlike UK gives money, England gives money to Scotland, this money will not be contingent on any policy implementation. Fourthly, the constitution is self-determined, but has to be compatible with the United Nations Human Rights Constitution, i.e. we will not allow for the establishment of another North Korea. Fifthly, the police force of these communities will be their own. Are there any clarifications about what the MEC is and why? Yeah? No? Cool. Wonderful. Right. First claim, principle and why this is right. Twofold principle, panel. Firstly, historical oppression must be accounted to. Secondly, right to nation state. First, why is historical oppression important in this debate? Firstly, debt is owed which cannot be paid. Lives were taken, resources were exploited, culture was destroyed. These are all things over the past 300-400 years that you cannot give back. What must the opposition come up here and give us? They must tell us how best will this debt be paid. We tell you the best possible way to do this is to allow the status quo of individuals who still survive to best actualize them in the way they see fit, to give them back the land that we took from them, to give them back the autonomy that we took from them. Second principle, why they have a right to a nation state. Note that they have a unique culture. These indigenous communities preceded the majority populations living there now. The white Australian majority came after the Aborigines in Australia. The Inuit in Alaska preceded the current American majority population, which means they have a unique, original, distinct culture, distinct religion, distinct values, family structures, societal structures, which means they have a commonality between them in which they agree to the principles of how they should be governed. They do not agree to the principles by which the majority has set up their constitution, and they do not have that degree of similarity. The extent to which we feel Israel or Pakistan were established on exactly similar grounds of there having sufficient commonality between populations on their culture, on their religion, on their historical identity of Israel being land of the Jews in Palestine, Pakistan, having a common nationhood between all Muslims. We believe these indigenous communities are not at all different to that. No, thank you. Secondly, why will the status quo not work? 5 reasons as to why the status quo will not work. Firstly, these indigenous communities are minority. Electoral math means they cannot come into sufficient power to make a difference for themselves. Second, they're often poor because of historical disenfranchisement, and they often don't tend to vote, so do not have enough political capital to be able to influence major parties. Third, people from indigenous communities who do tend to run must become a part of the major political parties in the status quo, either Democrats or Republicans in America, for example, because they are not big enough to form their own parties. In that instance, they must do some form of give and take, which dilutes their agenda and the extent to which they can protect themselves. 4, often indigenous communities live in areas of high resources. So, in Brazil, in the Amazons, in the forests in Peru, in North Dakota, for example, in America, where the pipeline is being built, this means that oil or mining companies or companies that extract mineral resources have strong, lots of capital and strong ability to lobby the government to exploit these resources at the cost of indigenous communities and there's no way for indigenous communities to fight back apart from literally sacrificing their lives and sitting in front of bulldozers and tanks and not move from there. Fifthly, we believe the individuals from indigenous communities who end up getting power are the rich and the elite. So the poor or minorities within the indigenous community get shafted because they have absolutely no voice. The best way for them to be able to actualize their beliefs and to have an actual discourse within the indigenous community is to give them their own state where they can compete against each other. Third claim, why will this work? Before that, NEPY.
All ethnic groups deserve their own country, i.e. will you finally give the Scots their freedom?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, sounds good. Right, well, a couple of reasons. First reason, differentiated policy. I told you why, it's quite simple. Look, given that they're a unique, distinct subculture, to the extent that they deserve their own nation state, they have particular demands that are either not compatible with or mutually exclusive with what a policy would look like on a national level. I.e., they deserve specific policies that are differentiated to them that cannot be taken into account by the government. What kind of policies are we talking about? Specific environmental protection laws that they can't implement, that protect their forests, that protect their water supplies. Things such as lower minimum wage, for example. Instances where we feel that, if they do not have a particular industry, they need to lower their minimum wage so they can compete with other industries or workforce. Specific economic policies that may work for them but cannot work for the larger country because it doesn't work for everyone. The point here to note is that because of electoral math and the other reasons I told you, they never get enough power to influence the discourse or the national debate such that they take priority over larger communities. Often Republicans or Democrats in America or the ruling party in Australia is more happy than to just concede their demands when facing a bigger electoral group that they want to cater to. Second reason why this is good. Often these cultures, because of their unique status, when it comes to the kind of religious beliefs that they practice, culture they hold, they have completely different ways of self-governance. Yes, we feel they should be a democracy and will have to be compatible with human rights as laid out by the UN, but that does not mean they're completely the same. If you look at Fatah in Pakistan, for example, they ascribe to a particularly tribal structure where elders have incredible respect, and the courts that are set up are A, more religious than secular courts in Pakistan, but also B, the court often tends to be the elders within a society. That is a unique societal benefit, societal sort of structure that ascribes to them, something you cannot imbibe within the national constitution of a country like Pakistan. Similar examples across the world. When you give them self-autonomy and their ability to write their own constitution and practice their own culture, they can govern themselves in a way that they concede to, that they are complicit in. Note, any opposition line about, well, what about the oppressed within indigenous communities will not fly, because we are happy to say we will have complete, immigration, free or open borders with these communities, where if any particular individual in an indigenous community is oppressed, they're happy to come and live in the rest of America or rest of Australia. That does not fly. Note, they have a unique status. They've been screwed over historically for hundreds of years. This is the best way to give them their debt, which is why the principle alone wins. But even if the principle doesn't fly, this is the only way to let them live better lives. Proud to propose. Woo, woo.
Let's work with the opposition.